Today's session will be recorded, as you just heard, and we will begin with a presentation from municipal staff and our OPP partners. During the presentation, we will have all microphones muted. Once that presentation is complete, we will have a question and answer period. If you have a question, we ask that you use the raise your hand feature within Zoom, and you can find that at the bottom, and it states that it is in the tools there. I will call upon everyone as I see your hands, and I do request that you ask the question and then mute your mic to allow for that response. Once everyone has had a chance to ask a question, we will allow follow-up questions today. The chat feature will be disabled for this meeting, so that won't be available for everyone to use. As with all engagement sessions, I do ask that everyone be respectful to staff and one another. If you do hear a question that you have asked and answered, we do ask that you don't repeat that question. And we may mute participants if we feel there are disruptions occurring. Lastly, if we receive a question that we need to receive or research additional information, we will park that question in the parking lot and respond back to everyone via email. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Caitlin.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us online today. So I'm Caitlin, an Economic Development Officer for the town of Wasaga Beach. And we brought you here today to share some clear information about operating a short-term tourist accommodation in Wasaga Beach. Next slide, please, Anna. So in particular, we're going to focus on a growing concern, the large number of short-term accommodations, or STAs for short, being used as long-term rentals, which is not permitted for these properties. We know this issue is complex, so our goal is to bring clarity to this issue. And by walking you through this together, we aim to help property owners understand what's required and ensure everyone is working towards the same goal, which is making safer, more livable Wasaga Beach. So we brought together a wide range of municipal leaders and experts to help answer your questions and explain the impact of this issue from multiple perspectives. So presenting with me today is Nicole Rubley, our GM of Legislative and Development Services. We also have Craig Williams, GM of Community Services, and also our Fire Chief. We have Danielle Gallant, our Business Licensing Officer, Adam Horton, our Chief Building Inspector, and Jerry Marshall, Deputy CAO, is also on the call. We're also joined today by representatives from our local PP detachment, and we've been working with Inspector Brooke McRoberts, Staff Sergeant Christina Schroeder, Acting Staff Sergeant Claude Duguay, and Sergeant Graham Schroeder. So finally, while Simcoe County Housing Department was invited, they couldn't attend today, but they have provided us with key information, and I'll be sharing that on their behalf. So they'll join us later this week at the upcoming sessions, which will be repeated tomorrow and on Friday. And so these sessions will focus on 3 key areas today. So we're going to be looking at why operating a short-term tourist accommodation as a long-term rental is not permitted. We'll be looking at the risks and community impacts when these rules are ignored, including safety concerns, legal issues, and hidden effects on housing. And we'll also be discussing the legal path forward if you want to convert to a short-term accommodation into a compliant long-term residential unit. So starting off, next slide, please, Anna. So starting off here, I just want to take a moment to highlight the broader objectives that the town has behind this session. So we're here to work towards a few key goals. So first, we want to enhance community safety, not just in certain areas, but across the town. Another important piece is promoting housing stability, making sure accommodations are legal, appropriate, and safe for those who live in them. We know this can be complex, so we've also here to clarify what supports are there for those that want to take this steps for becoming like a legal, safe, long-term accommodation. And we're also aiming to support beautification by encouraging residents to responsibly take care of their properties. And finally, we want to encourage quality improvements in both long-term rentals and short-term accommodations because high standards benefit everyone, including residents, guests, and the community as a whole. Next slide, please. So now let's just take a look at why this issue matters, not just for the town, but for residents, tenants, and property owners alike. So when short-term accommodations are used as illegal long-term rentals, the impacts ripple out to multiple directions. So at the community level, we see overcrowding at these addresses, which can lead to parking problems, excessive noise, and tension between neighbors. Rise in property standard violations, including poor maintenance, garbage accumulation, and visible safety concerns. Increased pressure on emergency services like fire and police, and on municipal resources, stretching our ability to serve the entire town. And overall, this reduces neighborhood livability and weakens the cohesion that keeps the community strong. But the impacts don't stop there. There's also serious risks to the people living in these units. So they may be living in unsafe conditions, and these units were not designed to be long-term. So it may stress things like electrical systems. There could be also issues with faulty wiring, lack of smoke alarms, or structural hazards that haven't been properly inspected. And if the unit is found to be non-compliant, they may face sudden displacement, often with nowhere else to go. So for property owners, the consequences are also significant. So operating outside of permitted use can lead to fines, legal action, and even the loss of your STA license, but we'll dive into that a little deeper later. And lastly, we can't ignore the broader housing effects. So when people are housed in unregistered or informal rentals, it masks that true demand for safe, legal, long-term housing. And that makes it harder for us to plan, invest, and advocate for affordable housing options for residents' needs. Ultimately, this practice just fuels cyclical homelessness, where people move from one unstable or unsafe housing situation to another. So next slide, please. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Nicole to speak about the past tourism accommodation conversion program and where it stands today.
Thank you, Caitlin. So the Town of Wasaga Beach TAC program began in approximately 2011. At that time, Council granted a temporary exemption to the business licensing bylaw for tourism accommodation properties operating outside of zoning provisions. In 2013, a housing strategy identified a number of factors that had contributed to the use of tourist accommodation establishments for longer-term residential use. The use of the motel, hotel, and cottage courts as residential rental housing fell within the affordable housing range in the housing continuum. Balance between the supportive and the transitional housing and private sector market rental housing. However, many tourism accommodation properties were not designed or constructed with the intent of permanent residential use. Issues arose whereas certain tourism accommodations were not meeting basic health and safety standards set out in the building code, the fire code, and electrical safety standards. In 2011, as a result of the complaints of unsafe housing conditions in tourism properties, the town conducted a compliance review of all tourist accommodation properties to ensure proper business licenses were in place. Situations of serious and potentially life-threatening conditions were noted on certain properties through inspections by our municipal by law enforcement division, fire, and building department staff. The safety issues for these properties were noted to be a direct result of the change of use from seasonal to permanent accommodation, coupled with poor maintenance and upkeep. Unfortunately, 14 years later, we're finding ourselves in a similar situation. That's going to be discussed through this presentation. The town acknowledges that many properties have changed ownership during this time, and we understand the challenges this may have caused. The TAC program has been discontinued, and staff are here to guide you through next steps as we work collaboratively to ensure that everyone is operating in accordance with current legislation, the town's business licensing bylaw, and zoning bylaw. Next slide. So when we look at what is considered a short-term rental and a long-term rental, we just look at the definitions. So long-term accommodations are rentals for 30 consecutive days or more. This is governed by different zoning and building standards and is regulated under the town zoning bylaw and the Ontario's Residential Tenancies Act. When we look at short-term accommodations, the zoning bylaw has two separate definitions. Short-term accommodations are classified as rentals for 28 consecutive days or less. Tourism establishments, which are more commercial, are defined as rentals for 31 days or less. It is important to note that we are going to be doing a zoning bylaw change. We're going to adopt a new zoning bylaw, and town staff will be addressing the definition for short-term accommodations moving forward to make that rental period consistent in the zoning bylaw. So the short-term accommodations are currently licensed under the town's business licensing bylaw, Schedule 20. It's also important to note that the staff are looking at drafting a new short-term accommodation bylaw that will be presented to the community. And the short-term accommodations are typically used for tourism, business travel, and vacationing. And I'll pass it on.
Good, thanks, Nicole. Next slide, please. So let's just take a look at what we're currently seeing in our community when it comes to short-term accommodations. So one of the growing concerns is that a large number of STAs, as I said before, are being used as long-term or seasonal residential units, which is not what they're permitted for under current zoning. So this shift creates a few challenges. For visitors, these setups can be confusing or even unsafe since the properties aren't intended to or equipped to be long-term living. And for neighbors, it can lead to disruptions in the community and overall lower livability. So we've also seen a noticeable increase in calls to emergency service and municipal bylaw coming from all sides. So operators, residents, guests, and some of the most common issues include a rise in medical emergencies and frequent property standard complaints. So to give you a better sense of the real impact that these situations are having, we've gathered some data from a group of approximately 43 STA properties that have been identified as housing long-term residents, even though it's not permitted for that use. And so to speak to the safety risks and the costs to taxpayers that this creates, we'll have our fire department, bylaw department, and OPP detachment present this data. So starting with our fire chief, Craig Williams.
Great. Thank you very much, Caitlin. And I do want to thank you as well for allowing us to be part of this conversation and ensuring that safety is makes up part of this decision making. So for the fire department, we were able to review 40 TAC properties between 2022 and 2024, so a 3-year period, to better understand the impact on our operations. And what we've observed is that while some properties did have minimal reliance on our emergency services, other properties, particularly some of the larger complexes in town, were very significant users. Of particular concern is that we identified 10 property fires at 10 separate locations over this 3-year period. So when you consider that we were only looking at 40 properties, that means that 25% of these accommodations experienced a fire. And our concern is that for the safety of the tenants, but as well for the continual operation of the business itself, because we do know that the majority of businesses that suffer a fire have a little likelihood of sustaining their operations moving forward in the coming years. So common causes of fires including careless disposal of smoking material, cooking incidents, electrical misuse, and resident impairment. 33 times we responded for activated smoke alarms, also other public hazards or assisting other agencies such as paramedics or police. And 196 times we responded for life-threatening medical emergencies. So important to note that the fire department does not respond to all 911 medical calls. We are part of a tiered response with the County of Simcoe Paramedic Services, which means the fire department only responds to life-threatening medical emergencies. Therefore, the paramedic service itself has likely responded to perhaps 3 times this number of incidents. What we have observed with certainty is that there is a disproportionate number of mental health crises, addictions issues, violence, and overdose deaths at these properties in comparison to other properties in town. And our estimated cost to deliver the fire service based on these incidents was $136,000.
Thanks, Craig. Next slide. So I'll now pass it to Danielle to speak to the bylaw data.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. So over the past 2 years, the Municipal Law Enforcement Department reviewed activity across 40 TAC properties as well. The level of enforcement varied. So some cases required minimal involvement, while others generated significant bylaw workload. The most common bylaw issues that we saw came from property standards violations, such as maintenance and structural concerns, noise and nuisance complaints, often tied to loud music or large gatherings, and clean yard issues like garbage accumulation and neglected landscaping. The estimated cost of bylaw services across these properties were around $105,735. So this estimated amount accounts for time, administration efforts, and enforcement resources used between that 2022 and 2024 period. These findings underline the ongoing impact that SDA non-compliance has on municipal resources and the importance of proactive property management. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. So now I'll pass it off to our local OPP detachment to present their data that they provided.
Good day, everyone. I'm Staff Sergeant Christina Schroeder. I'm the Operations Manager at the Huronia West OPP Detachment. So as you can see in the slide, the town requested OPP data for the 43 provided addresses from 2022 to 2024. This was broken down into just the number of calls per service per year. So green, 63%, there were 1 to 25 calls. Yellow, 25 to 50 calls, that construed 12%. 9% were 50 to 75 calls, which is the orange. And then 16% had more than 75 calls a year. 5 properties in particular were identified as these high volume calls for service, which included a number of calls ranging from drug offenses, landlord-tenant issues, neighbor disputes, bail violations and assaults, and various other criminal activity. Under the, I don't have a value for the cost for policing. Our billing model, it doesn't work that way. So under our OPP billing model, as described under the Community and Safety and Policing Act, properties are not billed individually for calls for service. So with the time frame, we were unable to provide a number. But each municipality receives one annual invoice calculated using a combination of base service costs, calls for service, and other direct operating costs for the entire town. So of note, each of these properties paid $391 in 2024, $372 in 2023, and $361 in 2022 respectively. So as you can see, the high volume properties that experience the increase in calls for service represented quite a disproportionate, well over 10% of the costs to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. So next slide. So as you can see in the previous slides, that data really speaks to the impact that this issue has on our municipal and emergency services. So switching gears here, let's just talk about the legal framework around longer term use of tourist accommodations like hotels and motels. So first, there's often confusion about which law applies. So some business owners believe the Innkeepers Act governs these longer term stays. However, the Innkeepers Act only deals with very limited issues like guests not paying and is very limited in stature. The main law governing landlord-tenant issues is the Residential Tenancy Act, or RTA for short. So the RTA protects tenants by providing security of tenure, meaning tenants can't be evicted without proper cause and generally have indefinite tenancy unless there's an exemption. So one key exemption under the RTA is for accommodations provided to the traveling or vacationing public, like stays at hotels, motels, cottages, or cabins that are intended to be temporary. However, this exemption only applies if the stay is truly temporary. So if someone lives in a hotel or motel unit long-term, say paying rent monthly, receiving mail there, not getting typical hotel services like housekeeping, and treating it as their primary residence, they may actually be considered tenants under the RTA. So this gives them tenancy rights and protections. So it's important to note that there's no clear legal cutoff point through these legislations or set number of days after which a stay switches from temporary to tenancy under this. So each case depends on its very own facts. So some people staying at like your short-term accommodation, they may have like long-term, may have tenancy rights. So if you have any questions further about these, it's important to seek assistance from the governing bodies like the Landlord Tenant Board or obtain legal advice to understand how these laws may apply to your specific situation. Next slide. So now I'll pass it to our bylaw department, Danielle.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess so before you operate as a short-term accommodation in Wasaga Beach, you must obtain a business license. So I'll just go over some of the requirements here. So the first thing is to determine if your property is zoned for a short-term accommodation. So zoning compliance is essential, otherwise your application could be denied through our planning department. So after the zone is determined, you would then first submit a business license application. So this includes the actual application form, proof of ownership or lease, a floor plan or a site plan. So that will show us the number of bedrooms and available parking, proof of at least 2 million liability coverage and insurance, and then any other required documents as requested. After the application is then approved, we would then look at booking inspections. So that's just to go to the property and inspect. So we would have the fire inspection completed by the fire inspector and a property standards inspection completed by a property standards officer. So it is crucial to pass these inspections before the business license is issued. Thank you. Next slide. So why renting out a short-term accommodation as long-term is illegal? So permitted uses of a property are outlined in our zoning bylaw. So if your property is in a zone such as CT or CA or DC, the permitted use would include short-term accommodation. However, long-term rentals would not be acceptable in those zones. The authority to regulate short-term accommodations comes from several pieces of legislation. So that does include our zoning bylaws, our business licensing bylaws, but it also includes the Municipal Act, as well as provincial standards like Ontario Building Code and Fire Code. So these laws just give us the power to inspect the short-term accommodation properties, issue fines, take legal action, and to just ensure compliance. So following the rules is crucial, and it ensures the safety of both our guests and our neighbors. It promotes fairness in the rental and housing community and supports the housing market. Next slide. Okay, so enforcement and penalties. So the town has several enforcement tools at its disposal. Property owners who violate bylaws can face significant financial penalties, which can increase with repeated offenses. So in some cases, the town may issue a compliance order or even a stop operation order, especially if there are safety concerns or ongoing violations. So for licensed operators, there's also the risk of having the license revoked, which effectively would then shut down the business entirely. It's also important to emphasize that continuing to operate outside the rules is not a valuable long-term option. So these kinds of operations often ignore important safety standards and expose both the operator and the guests to serious risks. Our goal is not to punish, but to ensure safe, fair, and legal short-term accommodation for everyone in our community. Next slide. Okay, so property standards for our short-term accommodations. So the building maintenance bylaw will set out the minimum standards required for the proper upkeep of all buildings within the municipality. So it places the responsibility for regular maintenance of the property owner. So this includes ensuring all structural components are safe, such as roofs, windows, doors, and exterior walls. They should be kept in good repair and in safe condition. In addition to structural integrity, all major building systems must be maintained and fully functional. So this includes heating, ventilation, air conditioning, plumbing, and electrical systems. Short-term accommodations will be held to a very high standard in Wasaga Beach. So in relation to exterior property maintenance, which includes signage, lawn maintenance, and overall appearance of the property, the town's beautification efforts are also going to be enforced by using our bylaws such as clean yards, signs, road occupancy, and fence maintenance. Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. So now that we've discussed like the legal distinctions and the risks associated with operating long-term rentals under short-term or tourist accommodations, we're just going to shift gears here. So if you're a property owner and you do want to rent your unit long-term on a year-round basis, there is a proper way to do it. So it's important for you to either choose the path of being a long-term rental or staying with short-term only. You can't do both. So on the next few slides, we'll walk you through the legal path to converting or operating your property as a legitimate long-term rental if that's what you choose to do. So let's get into what's required to move forward legally and what support the town can offer along the way. Next slide, please. So I'll turn it over to Trevor to speak about the official plan and the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Caitlin, and welcome everyone. So as you may or may not know, currently the town is underway with a new official plan and zoning bylaw. In the draft policies of the official plan, we propose that existing short-term rental properties that are located outside of a strategic growth area, of which there are 6, and are located in a residential neighborhood will become legal non-conforming uses. Which is not to say that a legal non-conforming use, if that was to happen, cannot continue. It certainly may. There's provisions under the Planning Act that protect legal non-conformity until such time as there's a legal change in use. And what we're considering in the new official plan are policies for those that are running an STR as a legal non-conforming use and want to consider perhaps changing their property into full-time residential uses, a series of 3 or 4 steps in order to facilitate that to occur. The first one is that in the new official plan policies, if you wish to simply use your property in the future for full-time residential use for low density purposes, it would not be necessary for you to amend either the official plan or the zoning bylaw. It's likely that the town will do that for you as part of this new official plan review or zoning bylaw review. For some of you that have a legal non-conforming use and are perhaps thinking of something a little bit more density-wise, for example, medium density residential uses, if your property is not in the strategic growth area but is perhaps located beside it, or if you have frontage on either a collector road or an arterial road, the policies may allow that you could do a conversion without an amendment to the official plan, subject to a list of criteria that council could consider. In this scenario, it may be that you might be required to do a zoning amendment. And in all other cases, if you want medium density and you don't, and you're not located beside a strategic growth area or not fronting on a collector or an arterial road, you would need an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. And in those cases where those people that have a legal non-conforming short-term accommodation and they want to go to high density, we expect that that would also require an amendment to both the official plan and the zoning and be subject to either to even stronger standards. And the one thing we'd like to hear from those persons on the call who may want to consider going from a legal non-conforming short-term rental to full-time residential use, to contact my department, the planning department, by August 31st, and the town planners would review your proposal against the policies of the official plan, and perhaps we could, instead of requiring you to do a zoning amendment, we could do a zoning amendment for you as part of the town's new zoning bylaw, which we hope to have done at the end of the year. So that option would be out there for those on the call who might be considering a long-term residential use instead. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thanks, Trevor. Next slide. Okay, so another thing to think about if you're planning to rent your unit long-term, full-time, and convert, it's important to understand the responsibilities that come with being a landlord under the Residential Tenancy Act. So the RTA requires landlords to maintain their rental units in good state of repair, regardless of the condition of the unit when the tenant moves in. So this means ensuring your property complies with all health, safety, and maintenance standards. And this is where other legislation comes into play. So under the Act, you must meet requirements under the Building Code Act, the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, the town's municipal property standards, and the Health Protection and Promotion Act. Next slide. So I'll now turn it over to Adam to speak about the building code, please.
Hi, thanks, Caitlin. I'm Adam, Chief Building Official for the town of Wasaga Beach. So many cottages and motels in our community were built for seasonal use and as cottages, and they weren't equipped for year-round living. And as they're increasingly being occupied during the colder months, owners have a responsibility to ensure safe and healthy, reliable accommodations. Some of the key concerns with that would be inadequate insulation and heating, risk of frozen plumbing, lack of smoke and CO alarms, inadequate emergency exits, and poor ventilation leading to mold and moisture issues. Next slide, Anna. So if it's being used on a continuing basis during the winter months, the owners will be strongly encouraged to ensure health, safety, and comfort during year-round use. This will include fire safety, smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, and adequate fire separations, egress, unobstructed access and exits from all sleeping areas. For heating, being able to a system capable of maintaining 22 degrees Celsius through January as the coldest month of the year. Having adequate insulation and moisture control, ventilation, working windows, mechanical ventilation where you don't, plumbing, protecting your pipes from freezing, access to hot and cold water. It may require ESA inspections for electrical and obviously safety, guards, handrails, stairs, and things along those lines. Next slide. Some of the tools we have, if some of these conditions aren't being met, would be issuing unsafe orders under the Building Code Act for things like lack of heat, frozen plumbing, improper egress, carbon monoxide, mold, etc. And a building is considered unsafe if it's in a condition that could be hazardous to the health and safety of a person while using the building or others nearby. So our priority is always safety of the occupants, neighbors, and emergency responders. Next slide. And some of the penalties, obviously, our goal is to work with owners and ensure safe buildings. It's not always our first step to issue unsafe. We'd rather work with you than take this path. But if we were to take that path, these are some of the fines for individuals. It's up to $50,000 for a first offense and $100,000 for a second offense and $10,000 per day in non-compliance with an order. So if we issued an order for 3 months every day after that. If you're not compliant, it could be $10,000 a day. And for corporations, it's 500,000 for first offense, up to 1.5 million for a second offense, and then the same thing goes for the orders. And the path forward. So anybody wishing to safely upgrade their seasonal buildings for extended use, seek guidance before winterizing or upgrading your units. Hire qualified designers or contractors. Apply for permits when doing any type of work, installation, HVAC, plumbing, adding walls, etc. And ask questions early. We're always here to help. Call us, email us, show up in person. It's better to ask early than to ask late. And a safe building protects your investment, your tenants, and the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. I'll take over here for the fire department. I have a series of photos to show everyone, and these photos are all photos from accommodations within Wasaga Beach within the last 3 years. And what you're going to see is the photos represent, in many cases, unacceptable behaviors of either tenants or landlords. And as we move towards the end here, there's going to be a number of photos of fires. Unfortunately, every one of these fires was completely preventable. In all cases where you might see violations in these photos, either orders or fines were issued. So our first slide here in a fire code, we would call this excessive accumulation of combustible materials, and you would probably know this as hoarding. So these are just a couple typical examples of what we found in some of our accommodations, and create completely unsafe living conditions for occupants, as well as those that might be living next door to these units, where, as you can imagine, a fire would spread much more quickly in these units compared to an ordinary unit. Next slide, please. All buildings must have unobstructed exits. And in these three situations, as you can see here, exits are not available. So on the left and the right photos, these are multi-unit accommodations, and we can't have exit pathways blocked with materials. On the right-hand side, there is a set of exit stairs. And as you can see, due to the deficiency within the stair structure, an owner had placed 2 4x4 posts trying to support that exit stair. This is a stair that was commonly used by first responders to extricate an individual out of the second story. And then you can only imagine putting multiple first responders and a patient on these stairs, and that's what's holding up their safety. In the middle here, we have a residential unit with an exit door at the top left of your screen there. That camera was held about 6 feet up in the air, and you can see the amount of combustible material in that room. Next slide, please. Smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. These are all photos of units that have sustained actual fires, from expired smoke alarms to smoke alarms without batteries to missing smoke alarms. In all cases, a fine will be issued. And during 2024, we issued 9 smoke alarm fines in 1 day to one building operator who neglected to protect all of their units with smoke alarms. And each of these fines is $360. Next slide, please. Electrical fires is something that we definitely see in accommodations that have converted from what was intended to be short-term stays to long-term stays, because often the electrical systems will be overloaded. On the left, you'll see an exterior receptacle that had extension cords plugged into it. The top is an overloaded power bar. The right is a cell phone with damaged wire. And in the bottom center there is an electrical installation that was improperly done, causing a utility room fire. Next slide, please. Smoking and cooking fires are very common for us to see. The top left and the top center photos were cooking fires. In the top right, you have a smoking fire. And actually all of the fires across the bottom, which you see there involving furniture and the structure itself, are all related to smoking conditions. Next slide, please. So our last slide here is a scary one. So this is an actual photo taken from a fire within Wasaga Beach. We have lost 2 Wasaga Beach residents to fires in the last 2 years. Again, both of these fires were completely preventable, and we cannot allow this to happen as a town. So If there's anybody on the call here thinking that safety doesn't need to be part of this conversation, they are completely wrong, and I will certainly fight them tooth and nail on this. This needs to be at the forefront of the conversation. So please look at that photo and understand that someone lost their lives there in an accommodation, and we as a community need to do everything that we can to prevent that from happening again. Next slide, please. So for the fire code, what it tells us is that if there's a change in use from the original building design, then the landlord or the building owner must comply with Part 9 of the Ontario Building Code, which is called retrofit. So an example of that would be as if you have a hotel that then converted into a residential occupancy or a vice versa situation. The fire department receives our authority to conduct inspections under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, and you likely have received an inspection in the past. And one of the typical outcomes of those inspections is something that's called an inspection order, where we give you a set period of time to correct a violation of the fire code. The fire department also has the ability to leverage different violation fines. For example of that would be a provincial offense Part 1 ticket, which is a max fine of $360 per occurrence, and it can be given to both the landlord or the tenant. And a perfect example of that would be the missing smoke alarms that you previously saw. Very important for operators to understand is that there is responsibilities both ways for landlords and for tenants. As landlords, if you have a tenant who is disabling or tampering with a smoke or carbon monoxide alarm, please let us know, because we will show up, investigate, and leverage a fine appropriately to the tenant if that's the case. Your responsibility as a landlord is to provide the smoke and carbon monoxide alarm and to ensure that it's maintained. Our other option is a Part 3 provincial offense, which has the same sort of escalation as you saw with the building department, so I won't reiterate it. Next slide, please. During inspections, we also have two tools that the fire department's able to use. Is one, we can order a life safety study when the minimum performance requirements of a building's life safety components are not met. It's a study that must be completed by a professional engineer or an architect, and things that they would look at is fire containment, such as drywall and door closures, fire detection, such as smoke alarms and fire alarm systems, suppressions such as sprinklers and fire extinguishers, and your routes of egress. And that study is what we would use to inform us of what changes would need to be made to an occupancy in order for it to be able to continue to be safely used. The other thing that we can do is when we are conducting our inspection, if we believe that the electrical system may pose a fire risk due to inadequacy or poor condition, we may bring along an ESA inspector with us. That inspector would issue their own set of orders to allow for an electrical upgrade. And we certainly see this occurring in some of these buildings that were only ever designed to be a motel and have very limited power supply and outlets. And they are now being used for long-term accommodation where people are bringing in many devices and they're overloading the electrical systems in an unsafe manner. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. So any further questions on what's required to become a long-term rental can be directed to those departments. So choosing to operate within legal guidelines isn't just about avoiding fines, it's also about setting your property up for long-term success. So first, it protects your investment. When your property complies with housing laws, you reduce the risk of unexpected costs, legal disputes, or forced closures, all of which help ensure long-term sustainability and even increase your property value. So second, it strengthens our community. Legal, safe, and stable housing supports the town's housing and builds better neighborhoods for everyone. So third, compliance protects tenants' rights, and that means fair, secure housing for all residents, regardless of their income or their background. So it also reduces liability for you as a property owner. So fewer risks mean fewer chances of fines, revoked license, or costly court battles. So from a planning perspective, compliant properties help the town maintain accurate housing data, which supports better decision-making and smarter infrastructure planning. And finally, it enhances the overall reputation and quality of both long-term rentals and short-term accommodations here in Wasaga Beach. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, a representative from Simcoe County Housing wasn't able to join us on today's call due to some scheduling conflicts. However, they did want to make sure that we shared some important information on their behalf. At this meeting, we also wanted to provide supports offered to those seeking shelters, as we know homelessness is a large issue that relates to today's topic. So County Council has approved a 10-point homelessness prevention strategy, which was developed in 2023, following a thorough community-based review of the current homelessness system in Simcoe County. So the strategy is designed to address homelessness through multiple coordinated efforts, focusing on homelessness prevention, improving access to housing supply, enhancing community health and safety, improving service access, strengthening system coordination, and finally ensuring that all these initiatives are data informed and built for long-term impact. So for the purpose of today's conversation, they asked me to highlight 2 key priorities that relate most closely with this session today. So point 1, making affordable housing more attainable as a key strategy in ending homelessness and increasing eviction prevention services and improving access to housing for both singles and families. So these efforts align with the town's goals as well, particularly around encouraging safe legal housing options and reducing displacement caused by illegal or unstable rentals. Next slide, please. So let's continue with a bit more detail on those housing programs offered through the county. So these programs are designed to help people move quickly into safe, stable housing while also relieving pressure on the shelter system. So 2 of the most significant supports are the Deep Rent Subsidy Program and the Housing Retention Program. So first, I'll just speak to the Deep Rent Subsidy that's available. So one of the reasons people remain in shelters is that there is no suitable or affordable housing options available. Sometimes units exist, but they're too expensive or lack on-site supports needed for stability. So to help address this, the county launched this deep rent subsidy that effectively lowers rental costs from market rates to affordable levels. Also, a key part of this initiative is the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, so the COHB. And this is a portable monthly housing benefit, meaning it follows the tenant rather than be tied to a specific unit. And so these funds are directly deposited into the recipient's bank account and are intended to help cover rent and utility costs. And so the county uses this program to move people out of the shelters faster, support people in transitional housing or encampments, and prevent shelter use in the first place by supporting those at risk. So, however, it's important to note that this benefit is only available to people living in permanent housing. It won't support those categorized as living in seasonal rentals, as losing a fixed address makes them ineligible. So that's important here in Wasaga Beach, where seasonal housing can lead to cyclical homelessness. So that's why it's important to make these units, if they choose to be long-term, legal, or get the people that need it into legal units. So the county, so back 1 slide. So I'll just speak to the housing retention program. It is provincially funded, and this program provides financial support to people to help people stay in housing by covering their rent arrears, utility arrears, moving costs, and other emergency housing related needs. So each application is reviewed individually. So again, it's important to note that this program is only available once every 24 months, and this means it cannot support repeat or seasonal transitions, such as moving from one seasonal house into homelessness every summer and then back again. So this program plays a vital role in keeping people housed, but again, it's not designed to support unstable or informal housing arrangements, like illegal long-term rentals in the STA units. So those in that situation will be helped once those units are legal long-term units. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to say thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today and for your participation in these sessions. As we've seen, education is the first step towards better compliance and safer properties. So if you're considering converting your property into long-term housing, please make sure to connect with our planning department before the date of August 31st and other departments as well to get more information on what's required. So it's essential that you make a clear decision if you're doing both long-term and short-term currently, whether you intend to continue operating as a short-term rental only or move forward with long-term rental model. You're not able to continue doing both. So you can find helpful resources, legal references, and contact information anytime on the town's website. And if you have any further questions today, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So with that, I'll pass things over to Nicole, who will be moderating the Q&A portion of today.
Wonderful. And we will now open up the floor. And again, if you could just use the raise hand feature, and I will call upon people to ask their question. And don't be shy. Not seeing anyone.
Nicole, can you hear?
Yes, Sean, go ahead,
Hi.
please.
Hey, sorry, I can't find the raise hand feature. I'm sorry. I was
No.
looking for the button, but I don't see it under. Is it under more, or is it under chat, or where is it exactly? I don't see it. That's why I didn't click it.
It would be under React. But go ahead, Sean, and ask your question there.
Yeah. So I don't know if you could just flip back to the non-conforming slide that I think the director of planning was reviewing. I have a property that is licensed for 2 units, but not licensed for the other 2, and it was left in a non-conforming compliance for many years. And I have a tenant there that's been there since I've owned the property since 1998. So it's it's non-conforming in that sense, and I'd like to understand what that process looks like going forward in terms of keeping it in its current use. Otherwise, it would be an eviction process that I'd be looking for support for.
Trevor, do you want to field this? And please know if it's property specific, we may need to get back to you on certain items.
Of course.
But go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to understand, because what I'm hearing from Caitlin is a black and white short-term versus long-term, but the town of Wasaga Beach and the council, and through even legal course of action, we've gone through this process for this particular property, and this is the outcome of Wasaga Beach. So it's, again, I've got a license for operations of short-term for 2 units, and the other unit is a long-term rental.
Okay, Trevor, do you want to?
Sure. So, Sean, obviously, I don't know your property. I don't think we've ever met. So, just understand that what I'm about to tell you, you have to give with a big grain of salt. But basically, what we're saying is that if you have a zoning of if you have a property that is running a short-term rental, and you have something, let's say just to pick a zone, CA zone, which is our accommodation commercial. If you're not located in our commercial or in a strategic growth area, and in a residential neighborhood, the policies of the official plan and the zoning bylaw to suit will be taking that CA zone and putting you as a minimum into an R1 zone. So as I understood it, I thought you said 2 and 2 units licensed, 2 non-licensed.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's we'll just say short term versus long term. So the long term unit would be legal, because if it was residentially zoned, it's allowed to be used for residential purposes. And then the 2 units that you would have that were short-term rentals would then become the legal non-conforming uses going into the future. So you would have then 1 legal residential use, and then you would have 2 legal non-conforming short-term rentals. And then you could continue those short-term rentals until such time as you chose or another property owner chose to change the use into something that was permitted under that new zoning bylaw.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's downtown core, I believe, right?
Oh,
DC is
okay.
where, yeah.
So
Does that change the?
yeah, so don't yeah, you should have told me that at the start. So if you are in one of our strategic growth areas and the downtown core is one of those, it's probably not going to affect you. This is what we're doing is making legal nonconformity for those properties that are outside a strategic growth area and are located in a neighborhood area. So you're probably not going to be affected, but if you want to, through Caitlin, send me an email and I can confirm all this stuff for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Sean. Just looking for any other hands or any other questions. Not seeing any.
We have one up right now.
Oh, thank you, Sylvia. Sylvia, you can unmute.
Perfect.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
I just like the previous gentleman that has just spoken. I have a property that I live in and I use as full-time rental and then part-time, like seasonal during the high season. So I believe I'm in a growth area. Do I need to be concerned because I have a license? I've complied. I have the fire department coming every year. I pass all the inspections. I have the parking. I built it to follow all the rules. And now the rules are being changed. Is that what I'm understanding?
Hi, Sylvia. So possibly. So if you're in a strategic growth area, you're probably not going to be impacted. But if you are outside of a strategic growth area and you are in a residential neighborhood, it's possible that if you have a commercial zoning currently, that you would become legal nonconforming. And what that means is it's not that your use has to stop, it's just that the zoning permission would end and you would be what's called grandfathered in, legal
Okay.
nonconforming. So I'll give you the same advice that I gave the last gentleman. If you want to contact me through Caitlin, and then we'll figure out what your property is zoned and what it's currently allowed for, and then we can figure out if this is going to impact you or not.
Okay, can we put your email address maybe in the chat?
We don't have a chat, but Caitlin
Okay.
can get it for you for no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So
Welcome.
how you registered today was by emailing me. And it's my first name, Caitlin.Monsma, last name, at wasagabeach.com. And Anna here's posted or sharing her screen of our contact information for the different departments and organizations.
So Sylvia, based on that, if you want to send an email to the planning@wasagabeach.com and just say that you were speaking to Trevor and you were at the STR education session, then